This landed at a ranch at Corona, New Mexico. The rancher turned it over to the Air Force. Rancher W.W. Brazell was the man who discovered the saucer.
What I thought was a star began coming in my direction at a very rapid rate of speed.
The unidentified object, which some sources thought might be a blimp, moved slowly down the Pacific coast from Santa Monica and disappeared south of Long Beach.
I saw a UFO, and it went down the river, turned right at the United Nations, turned left, and then down the river.
UFO Classified. UFO Classified. No more plausible deniability. Fact, fiction, or the truth. You decide. And now, the new voice of the high desert, the hostess of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes.
Happy Fantopia Friday, my friends. I hope that you all had a wonderful week and were as productive as I was. I must say that this week has been incredible for me as a researcher, as I have spent a good deal of my week, not only with my day job, but also talking to some pretty off-the-grid researchers, finding out more information about things that I am personally researching, and it is never a dull moment. Let me just tell you that all paths lead in one direction, and it's staggering, it's fascinating, but I look forward to, in the next few months, sharing information about what I'm researching here in Utah, the connections I have made, and the importance of what is going on, because there is each week I try to bring people who have important things to share. And last week, Ryan Skinner joined me, who talked about Skinwalker Ranch and his escapades there, about some information that he is releasing. And the game is on, people. It's time to really pay attention, especially in Utah, because this is the place where we know funding has gone to research the UFO phenomena. So this is important, and just know that I am on it. So I will keep you posted. I want to thank all of you for listening from all over the world. You are really the reason that I am here, and every week I get message after message from people that either see me on the TV show or listen to the radio show, and they're sharing sightings or personal experiences that are really, really mind-blowing. And I feel now more than ever it is important to create a safe place for all of us to share information, for us to know, especially recently since we've seen Tom DeLonge and To the Stars Academy coming out with different people in high-ranking capacities validating what we've already known for decades, that there's something interacting with us. So I think that now we're really in an interesting time. We know that this is happening. What is it? How do we research it? How do we know that the people that are working for To the Stars Academy, how do we know what research they're going to share? And if they collect data, where is that data going? There's so many questions, and I want to ask my guest this evening, who has been researching this for a long, long time. I want to get his thoughts on this. But I found William Center we became Facebook friends, and over the time since I become Facebook friends with him, we've shared information, and I saw a post of his a couple weeks ago, and that post really struck something in me, and I just felt, okay, I need to get him on the show. And as I look back at what he has done, which is truly, truly remarkable, the experiences he's had starting as a young child, like myself and like most of you listening, I believe, it is incredible to put the pieces together. And back in 2013, William held a conference that had people with backgrounds in science, military, academia, sociology, journalism, including officials of the Chilean and French governments there they came there for the symposium on unofficial and scientific investigations of unidentified aerial phenomena. And that was held in North Carolina. But he has done remarkable work. All of this started because of things that he had experienced as a child. And just like myself, it just strikes a chord with me. But all of these experiences built upon each other, and you start putting the pieces together. And William, I'm so excited that you're here because you have accomplished much more than that. And so give us a little bit of background on your work in the field of ufology.
Okay, well, thank you for having me on. I guess it all started when I was young and had some sightings, and I grew up in an unbelievable time in the 50s and the 60s when everything was changing about space and technology. And so just growing up and watching all the astronauts, and everybody was so absorbed into space. It was the new atomic times, and I had a sighting. I was born in North Carolina. I had a sighting. We lived in Roxborough. And I wasn't, but about 4 years old, and I was really young. We didn't have television. Roxborough was a really small town, and we didn't have a TV, so there was no way of getting news or anything like this at the age of 4. But I just had this experience where I saw, I don't know how to describe it. It was just some type of being or some person that was out by the edge of the woods. And all of a sudden, that's all I remember other than having this deep love for animals. And it drove my mother crazy because I was bringing every kind of animal I could catch into the house. It was like I had to save them all. And it was just really crazy. But my dad had worked with the federal government, and we transferred up to Washington, D.C. I guess I was 5 or 6 years old. And we moved to Arlington, Virginia. He was a deputy director of health, education, and welfare. And we moved to an area called Falls Church. I guess I was about 8 years old, and at the age of 9, I had a sighting. It was real early in the morning, and it was outside my backyard, but it lit up my upstairs bedroom, and that's what got my attention, woke me up in the middle of the night. And so I had this sighting at 9 years old that I couldn't describe, but I'm going to lead into real quickly that there were two people that affected my life back then, and one was my best friend's father. He was a deputy director of a Federal Aviation Agency. I'll just give him his name as Russ. He flew under Curtis LeMay, had an unbelievable career. And after I'd had this sighting, I asked him if flying saucers were real. And I don't know if for those of you at my age, back when Kennedy was the president, everybody was just so patriotic, and the military was just protect us all, the whole deal. But when I asked him that question, he just snapped his head around. It was like a shocking question to him for such a young kid. And he said, I had a buddy that walked into a hangar, and they supposedly had one that had crashed. And you know what they did to him? And I said, what? And he goes, they locked him up in a mental hospital. And I was shocked. I said, why'd they do that? And he said, because when he gets out and talks, who's going to believe him? And that just terrified me. I mean, I cannot tell you. I didn't even tell my parents what I saw. And I spent my entire childhood growing up and young youth growing up, not even talking about, just terrified of the subject and terrified about what happened. And I felt if I opened my mouth and, they're going to lock me up. I was really kind of naive, but it really did terrify me. And it really, really, set the tone for me being quiet as I was young. And then the second thing occurred is I had another sighting when I was 14, right in the backyard. We used to sleep out on our screen porch. And D.C. is really hot and humid in the summertime, and we would just sleep out on the screen porch in the sleeping bags. And I remember waking up, and there was this cone-like V-shaped light coming down. And it was like light out of a flashlight, but it was in the shape of a cone, and it got about 3 feet off the ground and stopped. And I knew that was crazy. The light don't stop. You shine, it goes on. So I opened up the door, and when I came out, there was just this big orange disc, probably about 100 feet up in the air, right above our backyard. And this light was going back up into it, and it floated off. And you couldn't hear a sound. I mean, there was just no sound, no nothing. And this thing floated off of the trees down the street, and I'm running down the street after this thing. But by the time I got to the end of the street where I could see it in the opening, it was gone. And so those two sightings really made an impact on me, because I saw something that just I couldn't explain. It defied science. There was no sound, no nothing. And so then I come to what I'll tell you about as a neighbor. It's my dad's best friend. His name was Jack. He lived on the street behind us. And Jack and my dad and another gentleman that was a friend were on the screen porch, and we had just gotten back from the grocery store, my mom and I. And I talked her into buying me. Look magazine had this flying saucer issue, and I just begged her to get it for me, and she brought it home. And I ran out back on the screen porch to show my dad, and of course, there come the ridicule. It just started up the banner. And Jack was military, and he was known around the neighborhood. You just didn't want to get around him. He was very strict and stern, and I expected that he was going to get in on the ridicule, and it just really tear me up. And the funny thing that hit me is I just looked at him, and he was sitting in the chair with his hands clasped together and his head down, and he was shaking his head no as he was gripping his hands. And he just kept shaking his head like in a no motion. And I didn't understand. You know, I thought he'd be joking, and it really shocked me. I was like, geez, I figured he would be teasing the devil out of me. But I didn't realize the impact that would make, because later in life I found out he was in Roswell with Colonel Blanchard, is where he was first stationed. And this guy went all the way. He was stationed at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. He was stationed in Washington. He just started Defense Intelligence Agency, and worked out of the Pentagon with Blanchard. And my mom and dad had divorced, and my mom remarried, moved back down to North Carolina, and I was attending her wedding reception, and Jack and his wife had come down to that, and I didn't even see him there until I was actually leaving. And I'm in my 30s now, and he yelled out at me, he says, "Hey, Kent," he goes, "let me ask you something, you still reading those UFO books?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Well, you need to come up and go fishing with me. I'm retired. I live up in Lake Gaston." And I was like, sure. You know, didn't think anything about it, and left. And then it wasn't until the 2000s when I was talking to my mother that found out where Jack was stationed this whole time. And then she even told me they even went out to like a Kiwanis or one of these clubs and gave a talk on UFOs, and that when he got home, his wife told my mom that he swore to God he would never talk about that subject again. And apparently they ridiculed him, whatever he had to say. So I gave him a call and was trying to get in touch with him and to get a meeting. And he was going to come down to my conference I was going to have, and we were going to really talk and try to find out some things. And sad to say, he had passed away, which I missed the boat on that one. But this guy had some kind of background with Blanchard, and he took it seriously. You could just tell from his actions, you know, and it was everything he did was top secret. His wife didn't know anything about it. And even Russ, his father, so that really spurred my interest when I was younger. What in the world is going on? And then it wasn't until probably the mid 80s that I had a sighting. Well, actually, I had another sighting. I'm going to speak a little bit about this synchronicity. When I had this conference in 2013, some really amazing things happened. I had told, and I've been on record, I've told everybody about my sightings when I was young. In Lumberton in 1975 in North Carolina. On TV, there was a report that this UFOs were seen for numerous nights. So I got in my car and drove down there. This was back in 1975, I believe it was in April. And I drove I'd never been to Lumberton. I got off Interstate 95 and just was driving through Lumberton, Red Springs, all that whole area. And I came up a long stretch in the road, and it was just nothing but like farming fields. And there were these police cars and another car parked off to the side. And as I got up closer to them, I looked up to the right, and there was it's like a red linear object above the trees. And it was slowly moving. And I got out and looked, and as it was leaving really fast, I looked down, and there was these guys and the sheriffs out in the field. And this thing started taking off, and I could hear a jet coming. So I jumped in the car and started chasing this thing, and I just couldn't catch up to it, and finally lost sight of it. And that experience, I started to, when I had this conference in 2013, Leslie Kean asked me if I would talk to Lee Spiegel. He was a reporter for the Huffington Post. And so he started interviewing me, asked me what got my interest. And so I explained to him all the sightings I had. And then when I got to the Lumberton report, he stopped me and he said, "Kent, do you know who I am?" And I said, "Well, you're Lee with Huffington Post." He goes, "No, Kent, do you remember the UN meeting back in the 70s? And there was J. Allen Hynek." And I said, "Yeah, as a matter of fact, I got a picture of that with Gordon Cooper and the whole deal." And he went, Jacques Vallée, and he said, "Kent, the Serpico-looking guy in that picture is me." He said, "I'm the one that organized that." And I said, "Oh, I'll be darned, I didn't know that." And I was just so, he goes, "Well, let me tell you something else. You know the guy standing in the field when you had your sighting in Lumberton?" He goes, "That was me too." He said, "I was the one you saw standing in the field." I'm like, "My God." And he goes, "And I want to tell you, you just missed it." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "This craft flew over top of them in the field, and it stopped right over their heads and shined a big, like a spotlight down on them, which terrified all of them. And then the thing just turned the light back off, just rotated around, and just floated off in the distance, no sound, no nothing." But to hear his description of how this thing approached them, the whole deal was just phenomenal. We became friends. We've met a couple times, had dinner. It was just great. He was always looking for the CUFO's Lumberton report, because he was an investigator, and J. Allen Hynek called him to go down and investigate the sightings down in Lumberton. But they had done this report, and I searched for a long time, even myself, trying to find this report, and I actually found it, a copy of it, in a bookstore in France online. So I purchased his book and made some copies of it and sent them to him, and his message that I received was unbelievable. He was so thrilled. But
so who wrote the book? Tell us about the author of the book that you found in France.
It was the CUFOS. It was the Center for UFO Studies, actually field investigation report on the Lumberton sightings.
Okay.
And it's a thick manual. It was a well-done investigative report. I think it's like 70 pages, 80 pages long, but it's unbelievable what's in it. But when I look at it, I was able to track down where I drove that night, which was great because I could see where I was when that occurred. But I had remarried in 2002, and on my date with my future wife, I said, "Look, if I really enjoyed our first date, but in order for us to date anymore in the future, I've got to tell you something." And I said, "I have got an extreme interest in UFOs," and told her some things. And I said, "If this bothers you, then it's probably not going to work, because I'm just been so absorbed with this all my life." And so I have shared with her since the early 2000s all the events that have occurred. Her and George Fawcett are probably the only two I've ever really shared everything with. But so she's familiar with all my stories, the whole deal, and all my sightings. But when that occurred with Lee Spiegel in 2013, it just validated my sighting that I had down there, which I couldn't have been more happy. I finally got some validation. And this second little synchronicity about this whole thing, when I had this conference, is my sighting when I was 14. One of my friends growing up in that neighborhood actually moved down to North Carolina. I'd lost touch with him for 35 years. He moved down to Burlington, North Carolina, where I live now, and he became a policeman for 20-some years and then a detective. And I'll tell you about another case that I had down here. And what I was trying to do was track down some of the deputy sheriffs that I was called on this case. I was trying to find out some of their names and see if I could talk to them before this conference. And my wife said, why don't you give Wayne a call? His name was Wayne. She goes, "Why don't you give Wayne a call? With all the experience in police force, he knows everybody. He could probably get you the right contacts." And I said, I said, look, Patty, I don't want to, he's a detective, he's a policeman, he's probably going to think I'm damn crazy, and I really don't want to bother him. She goes, well, you don't have any options. She goes, that's your best option, you need to use it. And so I called him over, and he came over to our house, and Patty's sitting right there. And I said, Wayne, I got to tell you something. And, after talking for 10 minutes, I decided to break the news. I said, look, I need some help. I said, I'm trying to track down some deputy sheriffs. I said, I've been interested in UFOs ever since I was young. And he goes, yeah, I know that. I said, what do you mean you know that? And he goes, don't you remember that big rectangular UFO we saw in the backyard when we were sleeping out on the screen porch? And my wife looked at me. I looked at her. I said, Wayne, I don't remember seeing a rectangular UFO. And I don't even remember you being around for a UFO sighting. He goes, oh, my God, it was a big square-shaped UFO just sat over your backyard. He goes, don't you remember? And I'm like, no. And for the life of me, to this moment, I still don't remember what he's talking about. And especially for back in the 60s, having a rectangular-shaped UFO, that wasn't very common. I mean, I don't remember hearing any back then. But it was shocking that here, apparently, I had some sighting with Wayne when I was young back then. But so that's another strange thing that occurred, the synchronicity. And turns out, even more validation is, I guess, the very next year or a year and a half later, after the conference and discussing my sightings. Here is, back in 1962, MUFON puts out an article that Norman Gagnon wrote, did an investigation on with MUFON Virginia, that occurred back in 1962 in Vienna, Virginia. Well, Vienna, Virginia is where this is. That's where my elementary school was. I lived a quarter of a mile from where this occurred, and it was back in 62 when I was 9 years old. Same time, it's the exact same time of my sighting that I had when I was 9. And here it comes out on this, and you can look on Google Map. It's just like not even a quarter mile from where I lived. Oh,
and that is so interesting. And I have to just say, Norm was on my show like 3 weeks ago, and I think the world of Norm. I mean, I like him.
He wants to come back. He wants to come to North Carolina here in a few months and visit me. Follow up on it. When that occurred, I saw this. I invited them to the second conference I had to come down. I gave them free tickets and just for them to come to sit and listen. And we hooked up there, and you know how it goes. Everybody's
absolutely.
so busy. We really haven't followed up on it yet. But
and I've got to cut you off right there, and I'm so sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
Because I can see Tina giving me the cues in our little conversation. So I am Erica Lukes here with Williams Center. We're going to talk a little bit more about North Carolina, about the experiences that shape your childhood, all of these cool things. So make sure you get into chat. You can call in, and thanks for listening. We will be right back.
Stand by. This is UFO Classified with Erica Lukes. Erica Lukes. The phone lines are open now at 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio. More UFO Classified. UFO Classified with Erica Lukes on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. After this.
Paranormal radio never sounded so good. Join the hosts of the American Ghost Hunter Show each week as they shoot from the hip without holding back.
They're kind of unpredictable, not like the rest of us.
Live every Thursday night, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, right here on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. Come hear some of the hottest authors, investigators, as well as TV and radio personalities from around the world on the American Ghost Hunter Show.
Our survival depends upon it.
Hauntings, UFOs, cryptos. If it's branded paranormal, we'll be talking about it. The American Ghost Hunter Show. Live Thursday nights, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern. Exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. The only question you have to ask yourself, Are you ready for it?
Yeah! All right!
I think it's great. It's great.
The all-new KCOR Digital Radio Network.
Great. Make a note of it. It's great.
The Fenton Files, where it's all connected.
You see, whoever controls technology controls the world.
Come explore a universe full of possibilities. Every Monday night at 8 p.m. Pacific, 11 p.m. Eastern. The Fenton Files. Go where no other show has gone before.
You can deny all the things I've seen, all the things I've discovered, but not for much longer. Because too many others know what's happening out there.
Whether it be UFOs, aliens, conspiracies, or even consciousness, your host, Lorian Fenton, has a file for that. The Fenton Files. Fenton Files. Your journey to the truth is but a file away. Live, Monday nights, 8 p.m. Pacific, 11 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. The Fenton Files.
Incredibly intense.
Where truth is just waiting to be discovered.
Monday nights are about to become hauntingly good, as Reverend Sean Whittington possesses the airwaves with Vegas Supernatural. Tune in every Monday at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern for Vegas Supernatural, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. There's a war raging between good and evil. The question is, which side are you fighting on? Tune in Monday nights as Reverend Sean Whittington sets the new standard for paranormal radio with some of the most influential personalities in the world today. Vegas Supernatural, hosted by Reverend Sean Whittington, every Monday night at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. The one show even the devil doesn't want you to hear.
You're listening to UFO Classified with Erica Lukes, where the truth isn't hidden beneath the black lines of a Sharpie.
That's the craziest thing I've ever heard.
To be on with Erica, call 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio.
Radio contact.
Share your thoughts on the show on Twitter by using hashtag KCOR. Or head over to the live chats at KCORradio.com.
The audience goes nuts.
And now, your host of UFO Classified.
Are you ready?
Erica Lukes.
Erica Lukes.
Welcome back and happy Fantopia Friday. I am Erica Lukes, and it's always fantastic to spend Friday evenings with you. I love looking at the chat room and seeing all of the usual suspects there. You make me happy, and I appreciate your support. Please make sure that you share information about the show, get the word out there. And I'm also uploading all of my shows to YouTube, which is probably the seventh sign of the apocalypse, that and many, many other things, many other signs that are taking place right now. But I'm getting those out there. So share. And, you know, if you see a nasty comment, make sure you just give a comment right back. No, we love people on social media. It's a good thing. But I want to just tell you that, again, I mentioned this at the very beginning of the show, that I'm working on some pretty incredible things here in Utah. And every day I find other people that are coming into my circle. And my guest this evening, Kent Center, has had incredible experiences. And as I listened to him talk about his experience as a child, and then putting things together as he grows up and has this passion for getting the information out to people, to making them feel better about their sightings, I think that's really it's so commendable, and I'm really happy to have him here. And I just want to say that, Kent, I know that you haven't been feeling very good, and you sound incredible, and that makes me happy that you're doing.
I got multiple myeloma. It's an incurable cancer. It's a blood cancer that attacks your bones and your spine. And I got this back in 2007. And this is another strange thing is that, I went through when I was first diagnosed, I went in with 7 others. I was living in Pittsburgh at the time. And, they all 7 of us had the same, 8 of us total, had the same treatments. And everyone else, they were pushing stem cell, the whole deal. And after I went through that chemo round, I was like, that's enough. I don't want this. And doctors kept trying to push it on me. And within 2 years, all 7 others had passed away, and they kept going through all the treatments. I never did have stem cell. It came back once right after, probably 2014. The disease started coming back, and so I went through mild chemo treatment for 2 years. Got it back down, but I've never gone through the extensive stem cell or anything, and all these people passed away, within 2 years. They were all gone by 2009, and for some reason, the angels are with me. I don't know why. The doctors are astounded because when I went in, I was the only one out of the 8 that was in the final stage of multiple myeloma is stage 3, and I was already at stage 3. I had tumors on my spine, my shins, my shoulders. I was eaten up, and yet I was the worst. But yet after that first round of chemo, I've survived it and just take the routine chemo pills. But it's just it's phenomenal how I'm still this is going on 11 years now. And I'm still here, so I keep fighting.
That is incredible.
I was Steve Bassett at one of the meetings, and I was talking to him. He says, those beings are watching over you, joking with me. But somehow I feel there is some force out there. There are some spiritual beings that are just taking care of me, and I don't know. Looking back, one of the luxuries I had having this conference is when you pay for all this, you can get these experts together. And this is what I wanted to do, is that after hours, I got them all in the room, and we all, for my children, I really wanted to do this for my kids. One thing that's bothered me is a lot of these school sightings, these mass school sightings, and the messages these apparently children are receiving. And it's to me, it's a little terrifying, and it scares me for my kids. And I don't know why these sightings have occurred or why they come over my house or what the deal is, but I wanted to totally inform my children about my life and share with them everything that's occurred, just so they will know. So I've documented everything. We've got so many films that I've made. It's like these craft, and I call them craft because these aren't these little glowing lights in the sky. These are actually like aeronautical lights. And in the mid-'80s, I had a sighting. I was getting ready to have my first child, and I was working 2 full-time jobs. So the space in between, I ran an assembly line for Northern Telecom on the midnight shift. And I was front office manager of a Holiday Inn from like 3 to 11. So from 11 to 12, I had to get home, change clothes, eat, and get to my second job. And I got home around 10 after 11 one night, and I got out of my car, and there was this craft sitting to the left of my house, probably about a quarter of a mile away. It was just up in the air, just sitting there. And I could tell it had 3 yellow lights, big ball lights that weren't normal. It's as if you painted them in the sky. They didn't glow. They were just bright yellow lights with no iridescence. And then they had 2 rows, one above and one below, of these small little lights, like you see on the wings of airplanes, but they were all different colors. And this thing just sat there. And I sat and looked at this for a good 10 minutes, and then I started yelling, try to wake my wife up to get her to come outside, and she didn't respond, and I didn't want to look away from this thing. I couldn't believe it. And so finally I just ran to my front door and just rang the doorbell, and then ran right back to the sidewalk, got in my same spot I was standing in, and looked up, and it hadn't moved. And she walked out of the house, and she's looking at me, and I said, look, don't look up. And I said, when you do, I want you to memorize the lights and the colors. And when you get back in the house, I want you to draw it. And don't talk to me until you do that. And then she looks up and sees this thing. Her mouth drops open. And I don't even think it was 10 seconds or so. She runs in the house. I think it just must have scared her, but she just ran in the house. So I'm looking at this, and then I go up to this tree that's at the end of the sidewalk, and I line the last big yellow light up against this tree just to catch any kind of movement. And this thing was not budging. And I just watched this thing. Got back, went into my car and got a flashlight out, and then started flashing like 3 short and then 3 long flashes over and over and over. After about 30 seconds, and luckily I was looking right at this craft, the lights turned off just like if you hit a light switch. And I'm like, then I'm just sitting there like, my gosh, why didn't I have a camera? Why didn't, and I'm just going through all these things in my head. And I went and threw the flashlight back in the car, and then I leaned back on the car, looking up the sky. I'm like, man, please come back. I'd like to see this again. I'm like, and I just had this desire for it to come back. And all of a sudden, above my head, straight up over my house, all of a sudden this bar starts appearing, starts out like a little light, and then it starts getting longer and longer, and this thing basically is rotating. And I'm seeing this back end, I guess, of this thing. And probably the closest I could tell you is that UFO sighting in Illinois over Highland and outside of St. Louis, where all the policemen were seeing it. That was probably the closest, the back end of anything I've seen to compare it with. But I had a movie company come and do a reenactment and a dramatization of what occurred and what I saw that night. And that's on one of my DVDs in that conference that I had in 2013. And that's the closest thing I can describe is what occurred. But this thing just zipped out, went over top of my house, and then started leaving behind my house. And I got in my car and started chasing this thing because I knew 2 streets over there's this big, long lake where I could see forever. And when I got around to that lake, it was about over the middle of the lake. And then it just booked out. It was like a falling leaf motion, and zap, it was gone. An interesting 20 miles in that direction is a nuclear power plant here in North Carolina. This thing was zipping off towards that, but whether it has anything to do with it. But that was the final straw for me. That sighting was this big craft that said, no, something's up there. Either the government's got something going on and not telling us, or this is so real, it's unbelievable. And it's being, hidden from us. So that's when I tracked down George Fawcett. And he's a pretty famous researcher here in the East Coast of the United States. As a matter of fact, all of his files and everything he donated to the International UFO Museum. He's got his name and everything in honor of him there. But George, and that was a little synchronicity between Tim Beckley and I when I talked with Tim. And a shout out to Tim in April. I know Tim's going through illness right now.
Thank you.
So
Thank you.
Prayer for him.
Yes, absolutely.
But God bless him. But Tim was familiar with George. He's had a couple dealings with George and used to meet him at some of the meetings. And George was just phenomenal. I had him, what I did was I called him and got Margaret Sachs' UFO Encyclopedia book, and I started looking for people that I could talk to about what I saw. And I saw George's name in Lincoln, North Carolina, and gave him a call. A schedule for him to give a talk to a Kiwanis club. He came up, and he was just so excited. And he said, you've really got my blood racing again. He goes, how would you like to start a chapter of MUFON up with me? And I said, sure. And so we started the MUFON chapter in North Carolina back in the 80s, late 80s. And so I was with him for about a good 13 years before I moved because of my job. I transferred up north. But I was with MUFON as state section director, and that's what I'd start doing investigations, and which leads me to an event that occurred. I was Timothy Good. He wrote Above Top Secret, which I found very fascinating and a lot of good information in him. And he gave a talk in Raleigh, North Carolina, and I was at one of his talks. And during that talk, I received a call from our state director. The MUFON headquarters had received a call from the Alamance County Sheriff's Department about a cattle abduction and a UFO sighting. So I went to investigate this, and this is where I got up with the deputy sheriffs and went out in this farm, and I took my video camera, and it was really strange because where this cow disappeared from, where he saw this light above the trees way across his field, when I got into the woods, I was training another investigator how to do an investigation, and he pointed out, and he says, look up. And we were in the woods, and we looked up, and there was a big hole in the trees and the foliage, and the branches were broken upwards. And I'm like, well, that is really strange. So I zoomed in on it, because it was like 60 feet high. I couldn't get up there. And I zoomed in on it and was filming it. And at the time, I was managing apartment complexes in a mobile home park, and I had an office, and it was in my residence there. And 2 days later, after I went out in that site, I had like an MIB visit, and this is kind of what pushed me out of investigations. I don't want to say I was terrified, but when these beings walked into the door, and I'm going to call them beings because they weren't human. It might have been humanoid in shape, but the first one came in, and let me just share with you, my desk was facing towards the front of the office next to the door, and to the right were my files. And I was used to police coming in and checking on people that were staying there, some of the residents, and I kept locked up. So at the corner of my eye, I saw these suits coming, and I said, thinking to myself, I got police coming in. And so I opened up my file, and when I turned back in my seat, my swivel seat, I looked, and this first one was coming in, had to bend his head down to get in the door. And I swear he was at least 7 foot tall, maybe almost 8 foot tall. And his face, right off the bat, I felt like an electric shock, I guess is the best way to describe it, just in my stomach. And it's like the rest of my body, I was fine, but in my stomach. And I wasn't scared. It just was, I just felt like something was numbing me. And I looked at this guy, the suit, the fedora hat, the sunglasses, but his face, I tell you right now, it wasn't even 4 inches across. It was the thinnest face I've ever seen in my life. His skin, it's almost like you could see through. It was real milky white. A short guy came in right after him and turned and stood at the left of my desk. And then when I realized that this wasn't human is when the third one came in, and he was an identical twin to the first one. And, you could not tell the difference. And both of them looked identical. And I sat there, and sitting down in my seat looking up at this thing, I was like, I got to see your eyes under your glasses, and I could, it's like I couldn't bend, but I kept telling myself, I got to see your eyes. But just as soon, and I'm telling you, it wasn't even a millisecond, just as soon as I thought, I've got to see your eyes, this being put his head down like in a bowing motion, so I couldn't look up under the lenses of his sunglasses. It's just, and and right there in my mind, I said, okay, so you can read my thoughts. And I just started over and over in my mind, I want to see your eyes. I want to see your eyes. And I kept doing that. And I don't know how long this lasted, but this Shorty, who I'll call him Shorty, to my left, he was saying something, and I couldn't understand what he was saying. He was just mumbling, but I was so focused on this first one, I wasn't listening to him. And finally, I feel my chair spin around. He's spinning me around, and he looks right at me and rips his glasses off. And this Shorty's eyes were perfect circles, just like a silver dollar. The whole eye was almost solid, of the brightest blue I've ever seen in my life, with a big black pupil and hardly any white around him. And I could see his face it was almost like he was making a frown. It was very angry, and he just screamed at me, "You are not to go back out there. Do you understand me?" And that's all he said. You are not to go back out there. Do you understand me? And I remember looking at him, and I just kind of nodded, yeah. And he puts his glasses back on, and they go right back out. And I'm like, I got to get this license plate. I got to get the car. And I couldn't get out of my seat. And I finally was able to get up as they were driving out of the park there. And I came back in the house. I sat down in the seat, and I looked up, and across my room where the kitchen was my video camera, which I had the film in there, VHS tape, what I filmed out there at that field. And the compartment was open, and the tape was gone. And I'm like, my God, I didn't even see him go to that side of the room. But the tape was gone. It was missing. But the only other thing is the third one that came in went by the two of them, and he kind of got behind me. And the only thing I explained to I had Dr. Haynes and all these when I had this meeting. This is part of my private meeting I had, and was describing what occurred. But it's like this one got right behind me, and I got this praying mantis impression because of his hands. His hands were bent over where I couldn't see fingers, but it's as if he had fingers he could touch the bottom of his arm, just kind of hunched over like a praying mantis's hands are. And that's the only thing that was in my mind at the time. Just this guy's on my shoulder, and it was just the strangest thing. It was like I was frozen. And so I had this MIB 2 days after MIB experience, 2 days after it. And the funny thing about it is, I never heard another thing about it. I told Patty back in the early 2000s about this. I did talk to George about it, and he discussed a couple of MIB incidents he had. And one, which he was giving a talk in Chicago, and he was warned by this MIB guy. And as soon as he got home, his daughter, who was in college out of state, called him, and apparently they showed up in her room, at her dorm room, telling her to get her dad to stop talking about UFOs. But he was sharing this experience, and he's the only one I ever shared this with, other than Patty in the 2000s and 2002. And then I guess it was 2008, an incident happened in New York in Niagara Falls, and it's the MIBs. I don't know if you've seen it. There's a tape of the MIBs at Niagara Falls where they got the actual. Oh my gosh, you got to go on YouTube. Okay. It's an encounter where they saw this crap. The manager and everything saw this crap behind the hotel. Well, a day or two later, these MIBs come to the hotel. They're looking for him, and he's off that day. The manager's off, and the girl that they approached, everything she said about these beings is everything that I told my wife in 2002. That like see-through skin, they were so strange, like you could read your mind. All these things she experienced and described, I described back in 2002. And here was more validation to my wife. I mean, to me, that's all I care. My angel of a wife, it's just somebody that can see what's going on and validate my stories. And I even told Mike, Mike Costa was doing our filming of our conference in 2013, and shared that with him. He's like, my God. And it's just unbelievable, that here's some more validation that occurred. I didn't even find it until right before the conference. Somebody suggested me to look it up. And it happened in 2008, and you can go online. I think it's just MIBs at Niagara Falls. But
so did you talk to Nick Redfern about this? You must have.
Yeah. I had a discussion with him. This is one of the reasons why I wanted him to be one of the speakers in my last conference. I've got to tell you, the first conference I had, my thing is, whatever reason keeps people from believing this, whether it's religion, whether it's fear, or whether, I don't know what the reasons why it's so hushed up and such a taboo, but there are just so many reasons that I feel the best way. What I wanted to do in 2013, I wanted to hold a conference that with scientists, with governments, to come and have news crews come and film this for the public to know, this is real. It's going on. Whether you believe it or not, or whether you want to be a skeptic, this is what is occurring. And so I figured the best way, I was talking to Leslie Kean, and I said, Leslie, who do you suggest? What's the best way I can do this? And so she helped me pull this list of people. And, I've got all these, nobody's ever seen a lineup like this at a conference, but Dr. Haynes from NASA, who did NARCAP, Dr. Westrom, he got his degree from Harvard, and he's the professor emeritus at Eastern Michigan University. Dr. Wendt, he's at Ohio State University. I even had Dr. Jeffrey Bennett, the astrophysicist, that did the Max Goes to Mars books for the space shuttle where they read to the children. He did all those Max Goes to Mars and Moon and stuff. I had him come and talk to this. Nancy Talbot with BLT Research on the crop circles. And then I had Jose Ley with CEPA with the Chilean government. He's just such a wonderful man. It's unbelievable. Xavier Passot was JPON. I had come from France. I had General de Brouwer come from Belgium. I had this knockout group of speakers that, and let me tell you, there's where my first experience in the politics of UFOlogy is that my first speaker I invited was Timothy Good. And as a matter of fact, I already bought his plane ticket, the whole deal, and I was informed by some of the other speakers that he couldn't come. And I could not do that. I already paid everything into it. So what the objection was him speaking about aliens and everything that their governments wouldn't allow him to come and speak. So.
Oh my gosh, we've got to go to break, and I want to talk to you more about this, because the list of people that you named for a conference is exactly what should be happening, and it is incredible. I mean, Dr. Richard Haynes has been on the show before. I mean, all of these people from France and from Chile. I mean, that's what we need to do, and I don't understand why that isn't happening. And no wonder I think you rock. I love it. I want to talk more about that and your experiences. I'm Erica Lukes. We are going to take a break. We will be back.
Listen very carefully.
This is Houston. Say again, please.
Houston, we've had a problem.
This is UFO Classified, live every Friday night, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. The truth is out there, just waiting to be discovered.
And now, if you will, accompany me on a journey to the future.
For more information on the host of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes, upcoming guests, as well as links to the past shows,
visit her website at UFOclassified.com.
UFO Classified.
UFO Classified.
This is KCOR Las Vegas, home of the Digital Radio Network, broadcasting from a shack just south of Area 51.
Wait, that doesn't exist.
This is the KCOR Digital Radio Network. Now for the news.
Now, broadcasting in digital HD radio.
The disc landed at a ranch at Corona, New Mexico, and the rancher turned it over to the Air Force. Rancher W.W. Brazell was the man who discovered the saucer.
What I thought was a star began coming in my direction at a very rapid rate of speed.
The unidentified object, which some sources thought might be a blimp, moved slowly down the Pacific coast from Santa Monica and disappeared south of Long Beach.
I saw a UFO, and it went down the river, turned right at the United Nations, turned left, and then down the river.
UFO Classified.
UFO Classified.
No more plausible deniability. Fact, fiction, or the truth. You decide. And now, the new voice of the high desert, the hostess of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes.
And welcome back for the second segment of UFO Classified. I want to, again, just thank all of you for being here, for being active participants, and having a great conversation in chat. I was watching the chat and listening to my incredible guest tonight, and I want to just address a couple things that were said in chat really quickly. We were talking about a little bit about crop circles and things, and I want to say that there is, on KCOR in the archives, there is an interview that I did with internationally known crop circle researcher Gary King right after the Ansi crop circle formation, and that was a very, very controversial formation. I had the privilege to be over in Wiltshire, England, and to visit that days after the formation and the discovery, and some of the incredible work that Gary King did immediately after the circle was discovered. And then I had a conversation where Gary took me to see Michael Glickman, who has written many books on the subject, who has researched this, and he is in a wheelchair and can't get out of his home. But to sit there and to watch Gary and Michael talk about this crop circle, to talk about the investigation that both of them had done, it was really probably one of the most remarkable moments of my life, and I feel privileged to have been there. The fallout from that was incredible. There were a couple well-known researchers who didn't step foot in the circle, I must say, and did a very good job of trying to ruin the farm owner's reputation. And it was very incredible. So I encourage you to go to the KCOR archives. I'll be posting the interview online with Gary King. And then also I have some footage that I shot in the crop circle over in England, it was a pretty incredible experience. So anyway, look for that. My guest this evening has made considerable contributions to this field, and his conference that he organized in 2013 consisted of people like Dr. Richard Haynes, people from the Chilean government. I mean, people from France. When I think of having a conference, I think of the people that Kent had at this conference and the considerable $150,000 to put into this conference to get it done correctly. That to me is where we need to go. And sometimes I look at some of these other conferences and think, really? Do we really need to hear that person speak again? And do we need to see the throngs and throngs of women following this person around? And it's just interesting. And Kent, I want to, just thank you for actually putting together something that is respectable. That takes a rare person.
Problem. I don't do it for money. As a matter of fact, anybody who wants a copy of my DVD conference, I've got a Facebook page, the Center for UFO Research, NC, and just send me a message. All I ask is just pay for the postage, and I'll ship the DVDs out to you. The speakers were just, like I said, it was General de Brouwer from Belgium. He had Jose Ley from CEPA, that's the Chilean Air Force UFO Study Agency. Xavier Passot from JPON, which is they're part of their NASA. It's like equivalent of NASA in France, but it's their UFO group. Dr. Richard Haynes from NASA that ran NARCAP. Dr. Westrom from Harvard, and Professor Emeritus Eastern Michigan University. Dr. Wendt from Ohio State. Dr. Jeffrey Bennett, astrophysicist. He does the Max Goes to Mars and all the books that NASA would read to the school children. Nancy Talbot from BLT Research. And bless Nancy. Nancy's going through, she had a stroke and she's going through some issues now. But and Leslie Kane with her book and all she's done, the work she's done. And Timothy Good. All these are part of the speakers list. And like I say, my main thing is I'm getting them out to universities and stuff. Since I had this conference, I've been asked to speak. I've spoken to a lot of high school classes, believe it or not. And these teachers have asked me to come in, and it's caused their students to read more, which is a good thing. and to do more research and take more interest in all the subjects they're studying, whether it's science, literature, it doesn't matter, just to improve your intelligence. But and another thing is that Lakita Adams, who's the state director of MUFON at the time, was asked to come and speak to some of the local colleges and stuff. So it opened the door for people to break down the barriers of taboo and to start accepting it, especially in the academia world. And the more that occurs, that it can only help. That's all I ask is just to help into this cause, because you got to get people to, even the skeptic, to start to believe in the first place that there is something, no matter why you fight it, whether it's religious beliefs or just fear. It's not going to take it away, and it's not going to hide. These craft have been around throughout history, and just one thing I'm focused on right now is what I'm doing as part of my writing. I'm writing a book. I'm doing a lot of study of the 50s and 60s, and to see what occurred in the United States military and why the mistakes that they made back then, because it was pretty new. They realized they got faced with a problem, and it was on them, and they didn't know how to handle it. And so they made a lot of mistakes. And if people go back and research the books of Major Donald Kehoe and Frank Edwards and stuff, and you'd be shocked at the information that's in there and what was released back then at the time. And they didn't even know how to handle it. So there was infighting going on about whether the Air Force should come out and say it or not, and it was always torn. And it seemed like back then the intelligence community won over at the time. But I believe there were a lot in the Air Force that wanted it known. But the problem is they really don't know what it is. It's much like this last sighting with this pilot. They don't know. And one thing that I paid specific attention to is how was it handled once that pilot landed back on that aircraft carrier? You know, and if you read and research a little bit into this last incident, they didn't even have a debriefing when he got back in. So basically it was pretty much ignored. But while he was up there, the flight controller on deck, that USS, that aircraft carrier, was very alarmed. I mean, was sending him in on something. But then when he got back, it's like jokes were made, and it's the handling of it and how to handle it. And there's a lot that they don't know, which is why they completely ignored the UFO over the O'Hare Airport. What are they going to say? You know, if a little bolt falls off an airplane or a tire pops on a runway, the FAA is right there to investigate and tear it to pieces. But yet, here it is. 4 o'clock in the afternoon, a UFO is hanging over an airport, in the Chicago airport, of all airports, as busy as they are, and they don't even investigate or acknowledge it.
Well, but I mean, like with O'Hare, and I have to ask you this because that was such a huge case, and there were lots of people on the tarmac and people on the plane, people that were doing maintenance on the aircraft. There was a lot of footage. And
there was
what I
pilots
understand,
opening their windows.
So where did it go?
You know, it went straight up.
But where did the information? Where did all of this
information? Yeah, it just disappeared once United made their employees shut up. Everything just disappeared, and it's just like all these issues just get dropped. You know, just don't write any more about it. Don't have it on the news. Going back, like in these books with Frank Edwards, is a phenomenal example. Frank Edwards was one of the top 3 radio news people back in that time, and back then he had 12 million listeners, which was really large back then. He had the 3rd most listened to program, you know, nationally, and he was told to stop talking about UFOs. And I can't remember. I think it was it might have been Arthur Godfrey or what. I can't remember who it was, but he was going to be on their show, and that's all he wanted to talk about. And he said, "Well, I'm sorry, I can't talk about it. That was, you know, I've been informed." He goes, "No, everything's fine. You can go ahead and talk about it." So he was on the show and talked about UFOs, and the very next week, the head of the union fired him and ended his show. and said he blabbed about UFOs too much, and it was pressure that they were getting from the government. And here's a man that was so predominantly known, and just you lost your show, you lost everything because you wouldn't shut up. And so there's a pressure from the government, FCC. There's a lot of these people just don't want to touch it. It's that big taboo, and but I'm analyzing everything that's occurred, during those times. I'm watching how their decisions were made, and the funny thing about it is, other things that had happened when I had this conference is I had a gentleman call me, and he was very old, and he told me he couldn't come to the conference, but he had to see me, had to talk to me. And his name was Howard Richardson. And he called and called and called. And I said, Howard, I am so busy, and I promise I'll get back with you. And I feel so bad because I never did. I actually completely forgot about him. And older gentleman, very old. And I had this conference with Travis Walton and Tom Reed and Nick Redfern just a year ago, October. And the manager of the hotel comes in and says, "You've got a message. You've got to call this guy." And it was Howard Richardson again. This is 3 years later. And I'm like, oh, my gosh, I never did get back in touch with this guy. So I gave him a call, and I said, Howard, I said, I'm so sorry. I said, I remember you calling me years ago. He goes, yes, I did. And he goes, I have to see you. And I said, okay. I said, where do you live? And he was in a retirement home. And this Detective Wayne that I spoke about earlier, I had Wayne. He's filmed a lot of my stuff for me. And I said, Wayne, I need you to come with me. And I took Patty, and I said, I want to go visit this guy. And so I called him back to set up the time. And I said, what does this have to do with? He goes, well, it has to do with when I lived out in the Las Vegas area. He said, when I worked out there. And he goes, I was with the FBI. And I went, oh, my gosh, okay. All right, well, I'll be there. Well, when we got there, this gentleman, he's on oxygen. We sit down, and he wants to tell me this story, and I can tell right off the bat, this has bothered him his entire life. And he is just, I can't just describe how he told me, but you could just sense it and see it. I just looked at my wife and Wayne, and I didn't want Wayne to tape it. I said, turn this off. And it was bothering him. He saw the light on, so we turned the tape off. And I said, Howard, you can talk to me. I said, what is it did you want to tell me? He goes, I was an FBI agent back in the late 40s and through the 50s. And so, and he goes, my good friend and best friend was Lee Andrus. And he goes, he lived in the city of Vegas. And he asked me to come over, and I was going to spend the night with him. We were going to go out in the town. And he goes, when I got there, Lee was coming out the door and said he had gotten a call and wanted to know if I wanted to go with him. And he said, no, I'll just wait here until you get back. And he said that Lee returned late that night, so shook up and disheveled. And he told Howard that he saw this UFO, this flying saucer, off the side of the highway, landed, and all these beings were running around this craft. And he was so shook up. Now, the way Lee was telling the story to me, Howard was telling the story to me, I always had a sense that he was there, just the way it bothered him. But, and then he looks at me like, what is with these flying saucers? And he was looking at me for answers. And I said, Howard, I don't have the answers. I can tell you so many things of the thousands and thousands of sightings by military, by police, I said, there's so much that's not known about this. I said, there is no expert in this field. And I said, nobody knows all the answers. I don't know what to tell you. And so I said, Howard, can you remember when this happened? And I started to get this information, and Howard just dozed off, and he falls asleep. So, I looked at his caregiver. I said, we'll come back. I said, I told Wayne, Patty, I said, let's get together. And I left him some information, some tapes, and my conference DVD and the whole deal. And I said, and I said, we got up and we were leaving. He wakes back up, and I said, Howard, if you can, I want to come back and see you. Just try to remember any television shows that were on back then, things that could hint maybe if you could give you a hint of when this occurred. And I want to find out more about Lee. And so I left, waited about 2 weeks, and I called, and he wouldn't answer the phone. And I called, and this went on for like 3 weeks. And I told Patty, I said, Patty, I think he's paying me back for not calling him back. And she said, Kent, and she goes, I hate to say this, but go on the obituaries and pull it up. And I pulled up Greensboro obituaries, and darn if he didn't pass away. He passed away 2 weeks later. And so I missed my chance.
Oh, but isn't that hard though? Because it just seems like you want to reach out to people, and people are getting older, and then it's just timing.
Yeah,
and so
it is.
I
just, Jack had passed away. George Fawcett, I was going to do this 2013 conference in his honor. And on January, what happened was we moved down from Pittsburgh in January of 2013. And I started organizing this in February. And I gave George a call only to find out that he was in the hospital, had Alzheimer's, and he passed away on January 27th. And that broke my heart. So Jack had passed away, and then George Fawcett passed away. Broke my heart. And now this guy, Howard, he passes away 2 weeks after I see him. And but the thing about it, going through these books, I did find out as I'm researching, I've got to go do further research, that in one of Donald Kehoe's books back from the 50s, he lists these Air Force cases, and I think it was case 218 or whatever I'm trying to track down now, because it has to do with 2 FBI agents in a sighting that occurred in Vegas. And I'm like, you know what? I've got to really tear into this. I bet you that was Howard. And I was reading Howard's obituary, and this is a guy who actually became head of all the special agents out of the headquarters in Washington, D.C., the FBI headquarters. I mean, this wasn't no fluke. This was no just a ignorant man. This is a man who was the head of all the special agents for the FBI, and he's based out of Washington, D.C. And so this is something that it bothered a man of this much power, back in the time. He was a fluent man that is no kook. And it's just another example of all the great witnesses you can find out there. I actually, Lakita turned me on to another one that I never heard about, but I was so shocked. It's a quarter of a mile from my house right now. Is this school? It's now the town hall, this little town called Whitsett. And apparently, back in 1954, there was a UFO sighting. It's actually 6 or 8 craft that sat over that school. And in front of 120 students, the principal was out there, Dr. Lambeth, and he had the teachers come out. It was like 15 minutes before school was supposed to let out, so they went ahead and let all the students out, and they all watched these craft sitting over the school. And then they zipped off one by one, and after they zipped off, all this angel hair fell and covered the entire neighborhood there. And it happened on October 27th. And exactly 1 year to the day, on October 27th, was the famous sighting in Italy in a soccer stadium, where these craft came down, did the same thing, and then zipped off, and all this angel hair fell. Now, angel hair is real common in October.
And I have to ask you, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, but angel hair, I mean, that's not something that you hear about now with regard to sightings, but that was certainly something that you heard about back
in the
then.
50s, 60s.
Right.
And I think there was a case a few years ago. I can't remember when. I have to look it up. But Brian Bolding, North Carolina has had so many sightings throughout history and so many important sightings. And like this one in particular, this made national news. This was on the national news and actually made international news. It was on the AP Wire. And so I actually met Dr. Lambeth is still alive and just as brilliant as ever. He's probably one of the most brilliant men I've ever met. He made me feel silly when I talked to him. He is so smart. He started working with autistic children. He was a teacher, and this rabbi had a son that was autistic that brought his son to him, and he did this class and set up all these working tools with art and work with sand, like in a sandbox, and he just started working with all these children, and he was recognized by President Kennedy and Jacqueline Kennedy, and they paid for a grant for him to go get his graduate degree. That's how he became a doctor, and they awarded him that. This guy was a phenomenal person. He was a navigator in World War II who also flew under Curtis LeMay, just like my best friend's father. He was a navigator and actually corrected their maps when they were bombing into China from India. They had to fly over the Himalayan mountains, and they were going to crash into them because their maps were wrong. He corrected all the maps for the Air Force on that. This guy's unbelievable. Had 5 children, and his wife died of cancer when their youngest was 8 months old. He never remarried and finished his degree while raising those 5 children on his own. And this guy is so phenomenal. He is so brilliant. And so what I did is I wanted to get his story down, and I did a little bitty documentary on him.
Oh, and I hear that music. Okay, we're going to talk about the documentary. We get back on Erica Lukes here with Kent Center. I hate to cut you off, but this is our last break for the evening, and we will be right back.
Stand by.
This is UFO Classified with Erica Lukes.
Erica Lukes.
The phone lines are open now at 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio. More UFO Classified.
UFO Classified.
With Erica Lukes on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. After this.
Here's what happened on the last episode of Three Guys, No Ties.
I have a fun one. Okay. A Bangkok clinic offering penis whitening.
I kind of heard about this.
Says it's swelling with more than 100 customers a month. The $650 routine uses a very small laser over 5 sessions. Adds some. It has become very popular in the Bangkok LGBT community.
Just a quick
Lightening
question.
your penis. Okay.
Does it make it smaller?
I don't know. I think the laser would make it a little smaller. Most guys can't really afford that.
Whitening it. Does it make it smaller?
I guess so.
Wondering. Thank you. Good night.
Three Guys, No Ties. Wednesday nights, 7 to 9 Pacific on the KCOR Digital Radio Network.
This is the world-famous KCOR.
That's the only station I listen to.
Thursday nights are about to get weird on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. Join hosts Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz as they go exploring the bizarre. Jet across the cosmos with 2 of the most electrifying paranormal researchers in the known universe. Thursday nights at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern. Exploring the bizarre takes you deep within the world of the unexplained. UFOs, ghosts, lost worlds, cryptozoology. It's time to take back the night with hosts Timothy Beckley and Tim Swartz. Exploring the bizarre. Thursday nights at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern. Only on the KCOR Digital Radio Network.
Friday night, 9 p.m. Pacific. Jump onto the Celestial Highway and travel at the speed of light. Into hyperspace. Hyperspace. Hosted by Solaris Blue Raven. She navigates you through the cosmic tides of mysticism into the world of covert technology, UFOs, mystical sciences, and the world of unforeseen forces.
You get to really sort of enjoy a bizarre ride.
Listen live, Friday night, 9 p.m. Pacific.
For Hyperspace.
The one show that blows the whistle off our government black ops projects. Hyperspace. Hosted by Solaris Blue Raven.
Solaris Blue Raven.
Exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network.
Want to take a ride? Take a ride. Take a ride. You're listening to
UFO Classified with Erica Lukes, where the truth isn't hidden beneath the black lines of a Sharpie.
That's the craziest thing I've ever heard.
To be on with Erica, call 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio.
Radio contact.
Share your thoughts on the show on Twitter by using hashtag KCOR. Or head over to the live chats at KCORradio.com.
The audience goes nuts.
And now, your host of UFO Classified.
Are you ready?
Erica Lukes.
Erica Lukes.
Welcome back and happy Fantopia Friday. It wouldn't be a Friday and it wouldn't be UFO Classified if I didn't give a big shout out to my producer, Tina Marie, the station owner, who does an incredible job. I am absolutely grateful to be on such a respectable network, and I support Dave and all of these other wonderful people who have shows on this network. And I want to also just give my love and my prayers to Tim Beckley, who has been going through a rough time as of late, and we both, and I know that my guest this evening, Kent, you share the same thing because you were on Tim's show.
Yeah, that's a matter of fact. He had just found out the day before his health issues, and going through what I've been going through, I just, tried to give my support because doctors, they'll tell you things, but I tell you, first of all, I was misdiagnosed. And I knew, other specialists said I had cancer, but I went untreated for a year and a half, which made it incurable. And then again, what they try to push stem cell and everything else, I think one knows their body, and all doctors can say different things. And the only thing I can tell you is no doctor can give you a timetable. No doctor has the say-so of how long you're going to live. So you just have to be strong and just attack it, and that's what I've done. I just don't listen to the doctors about most things. And I let my body tell me what's going on, and I wish the best for Tim. If you stay strong, you can beat this. Just stay positive. And I tell you, in my life, my wife, Patty, has changed my life for the better so much. If it wasn't for her, I wouldn't even be here right now. She pulled me through this cancer. She's been my supporting arm. At that conference in 2013, without her support, she pushed me to do it, because I would just sit and talk about it. But she has been so supportive in my life, and she's meant everything to me, and it's such an angel.
April, I'm tearing up.
It's unbelievable, though. I mean, everybody here, like the members of MUFON, when you go to talks, they all know Patty. They love Patty to death. She's a protector of all animals and all elderly people. She's just such a wonderful angel, and everybody loves her to death down here. And no matter where she goes, at work or whatever, she's just a blessing.
But you said something, though, when, earlier in the show, you said that immediately, you said to her, this is my life. This is what's going on. And she accepted you and supported you with open arms. And I think that takes a really special person, because this is, we become obsessive about this. And this is pushing the boundaries of everything. And I know I wasn't as fortunate as you to find a partner that could hang with my obsessions or
it's tough.
It is.
It really is tough. It affects it. I was a regional vice president for 15 years, and even in my jobs, it's affected my jobs because sometimes I couldn't keep my mouth shut. You know, sometimes would say something and I would start talking, and just the sideways look you get, or the people that stand in the background humming the Twilight Zone tune. It's so sad, and that's what I've been trying to fight. All this time. I'm doing something now. I'm trying to get with the local police around just to give talks to the police because. A lot of them are closed-minded about the subject, but you'll never know one night when they're out driving, something might occur, There's been so many police sightings, they're the ones out there that can, they're there in the middle of the night driving the roads. I've got a ex-brother-in-law who was a policeman for 20-some years, and he came to one of our first MUFON meetings we had in Raleigh, and he had had a sighting. But don't you know, as soon as the TV cameras came out, he ran, and for fear of his job,
Well, and I don't blame him, and I think it's been quite disgusting to look back historically to see what the media has done. Obviously this was all the grand master plan, but I mean, this has been minimalized, this has been marginalized, and I think it's been really unfortunate for people, especially in law enforcement, when they're getting these calls in the middle of the night and they don't know where to turn. And I think of, here in Utah, we had Junior Hicks, who fielded all the calls in the 60s and even now from law enforcement because he developed that relationship. But there people in law enforcement, pilots, there's so many people who don't know how to cope with this, and they're not given resources. And so hopefully, it sounds like you're doing incredible work to change that. And I think that things are happening that will change the sentiment of this and give this topic the credibility that it deserves.
Yeah, it's just, Jim Courant, he's a friend of mine. I've been down to his house, and spoke with him on occasions, and what he had to go through, as far as being a pilot and the sightings they had. He testified that disclosure hearing up in D.C., and he actually, North Carolina group, the MUFON chapter, is just a phenomenal group. Jim Courant came to one of our meetings and actually first told his story to our group. And TV cameras came in. Naturally, we had to kick him out because he wouldn't talk anymore. But some of the sightings he had, a mile-long craft when he was flying I think he flew cargo, and he was flying from Australia to Japan and China, and would see these mile-long craft up in the sky, but couldn't talk about it. It was just phenomenal.
And so I want to say, because North Carolina is a place of repeated activity, and Chris Bledsoe is a dear friend of mine. He's been on the show before, and he has been to your conference before, and so you know him. So tell me what your thoughts are on why North Carolina is such an active area.
I don't, other than the military, you have Fort Bragg here, you've got some Air Force bases around here, but, the large Fort Bragg area, we've got nuclear power plants. I don't know if it's the military that's drawn it in, right there on the border, you've got Norfolk, Virginia, and you've got the fleets that stay there. I don't know what it is, but the history of it is just phenomenal, the amount of sightings here in North Carolina. I really couldn't tell you. I don't know why, other than the military presence. Whether that has anything to do with it or not, I don't know. But one of the things I did ask, what I call a roundtable discussion. I filmed for my children. I had Xavier Passot, Dr. Haynes, Dr. Westrom, Charles Halt was there in the room, where I wanted to just talk about my experience and get their feedback. And a lot of things I really can't discuss because of privacy. Dr. Haynes especially wanted a lot of privacy on it. But I learned that based on their take and their experiences and their investigations and everything, there's just two types. You're either there by accident, you accidentally come upon a sighting, or there's a reason, and they make contact, they come around, and there's a reason. And their views were that for some reason they are coming to me. They're coming, these craft. I don't want to go into abductions. I've had another experience that I'd rather I keep private, but it had to do with some missing time. Actually, was driving from North Carolina to D.C. and got to an area between Petersburg and Richmond. It was around Dinwiddie, Virginia, and I'm on the interstate, and if anybody drives that knows it's just a long stretch of barren highway. And right before, when you probably maybe a half an hour, once you've driven into Virginia for a half an hour, there's a sign on the right-hand side that's been there all my life. It says the area is patrolled by aircraft. So, you might get a speeding ticket, from somebody up in the air. And I was driving, it was late at night, it was 11:30 at night, and all of a sudden my car just lit up. And it was like a spotlight was up on top above my car, and it lit up the whole highway. And I was thinking, right then I was like, I'm getting a ticket, because I was doing 70 miles an hour, and I'm like, I am getting a ticket. And I had a dog that was riding in the back of my car. It was like a hatchback. He was in the back of my car, and the window blows out. And everything felt like it was just went into slow motion. And all the glass, when you're driving, all that glass got sucked up to the front windshield. And I closed my eyes so I didn't get glass in my eyes, and I couldn't even open this to steer. So I just kept the wheel straight, and I just put my foot on the brake. But it's like nothing was happening. And when I come to a stop, I brushed the glass out of my eyes, my eyelids, and it just felt like it had glass all over you. And so before I opened them, I was just trying to clean my face off, and then I opened my eyes, and I'm on some country road, not even on Interstate 85 anymore. I'm on this country road, and my dog is sitting in my passenger seat right next to me, laid out asleep. And there's glass all over the car. And I was just so confused, and I don't know what happened, but my whole back window blew out. And so I got out, and I don't know if you remember, back then you had what these called whisk brooms, little small brooms that used to clean your car out with and clean the carpets. And so I took this whisk broom out, and I'm just cleaning all the glass out of my car so I could get going. But I didn't even know where I was. And I drove. It was on a dirt road. It was like a field, a farmer's field. And I got to the end of this dirt road, and there was an asphalt road. And I got onto that, and I drove for a few minutes before I saw a sign for 95. And I'm like 2 miles off the interstate. And when I got back up to the D.C., I noticed once I got to Fredericksburg, Maryland, the sun's coming up, and I'm missing like 2 hours' time. And that's all I can tell you about it. It was just, I still have the receipt of when I had my window replaced. It was just unbelievable. And not knowing what happened, Dr. Haynes and him, they talked about me getting hypnotized, but I don't want to go that route. I feel whatever is going to come will come naturally. I don't want to experience that because of, they say you could put things into your head and all that when you're under hypnosis or to be talked to. So I just leave it alone. Let my brain, my body, let me remember one day. And it was just the strangest occurrence. That's the only thing as close as I'll get to talking about any kind of abduction scenario in the past. But it's just talking to Dr. Westrom and them. They have a feeling that I've been picked out for some reason. It's like you're either chosen. For instance, like Travis was more of an accident. He came upon this and he actually got hurt, and they didn't really abduct him. They were taking him to save his life and to help heal him. But you either accidentally come upon it or you're chosen. And the feedback I got from Xavier Pousseau and Dr. Haynes and Dr. Westrom was that for some reason this has gone on my entire life. And as a matter of fact, Lindsay can tell you, there's times I feel like Richard Dreyfuss out of Close Encounters. Well, I'll just be sitting there, just watching a movie or whatever, and I just get this, it's like a strange feeling overcomes me, and I'll go outside, and you'll see a glowing light or something going on. One time, I just went outside, and my daughter followed me, Lindsay, and there were like 30 of these like little dots way up in the sky, and they were just all flying around doing just real erratic movements. And she looked up and she goes, "Did you know that?" I said, "Yeah, I just had a feeling, I just had to come outside."
So let me ask you, so this is in North Carolina?
Yeah.
Okay, and this is, so when was the most recent sighting that you had? Because I've got somebody in chat who would like to know that.
Actually, was driving back from Asheville, North Carolina. It was like at 1 a.m. coming back to Burlington. It was about 1.5 years ago. It doesn't, and I want people to understand, this is not something that's every day of my life. It's not. You could probably count my experiences, maybe 25 experiences throughout my entire life. And most of those are like maybe some glowing lights or whatever. But actual craft where you see something that just defies logic, there's been 3 of those. Others are just glowing lights, just what I'd call normal UFO sightings. They're your glowing lights kind of thing. And keep in mind, based on all the studies and all the research, I'm very familiar. I saw a satellite burn up and re-enter the atmosphere as it sat over an interstate where I was working. I watched this thing and thought it was a helicopter with a spotlight hanging down, and I watched it for 25 minutes. And then all of a sudden, it's like the tail, the spotlight, what it was a tail, and the Earth's curvature made it look like it was coming straight down. But that was actually behind it, and it was flying in. Turns out it was a Russian satellite. But I was fooled for a good 20 minutes thinking it was a helicopter, with a spotlight shining down over the interstate, the bad accident. So I've seen that. I've seen so many things, and I can tell you most can be explained. But out of the ones that can't be explained, I've seen, no more than 30 in my entire life. So, I'm 64 years old, so this is not like something that happens to me every day. But it causes you to look up in the sky a lot, and you see things that you would normally miss if you're not paying attention or not looking up. Had I not, that night in Durham, when I got out of the car, had I not glanced up, I would never have seen that craft, and then it turns out it comes right over top of my head. But I can't imagine the number of times people miss things because they're just not looking up,
No, they're not. We don't. So. I mean, and that's the sad thing. And I want to ask you because, for me, the more time I spend in this field, the more I realize that research, especially in the United States, or the field of ufology in the United States, is so dysfunctional. And I really believe that certain organizations or players in the field are trying to move us away from the truth. I mean, what are your thoughts on the way things go with big organizations?
I think you need to start with hardcore science. Rich Hoffman, Ted Rowe with NARCAP. Start getting this information down scientifically. Keep your thoughts and your beliefs out of it, and just attack it from a scientific perspective, and go by the facts. I mean, there's enough out there with just military and police sightings alone to start formulating, and the demons, and how can you go there when you can't even accept that there are craft flying in our skies,
Right. And I think the extraterrestrial hypothesis, I think we shouldn't be necessarily going there.
No, I don't. You don't know. There's no proof. You don't know. Some have clues, some have beliefs, but thing about it is, research it. Let's get the basics down first. It's like what I try to do with my conference. Okay, let's look at the science part of this. Let's look at the reality. Like how Richard Hoffman attacked the Puerto Rico sighting. And really get into it with facts. And once you've gotten that and you determine that something's actually happened, something's occurred, go from there. But people have got to get to point A before they're going to get to point B, C, D, and all the others. Everybody just wants answers. Everybody wants all this. The thing is to really go back and be open and honest about what's occurred in the past. This is why I'm tearing the 50s and 60s up. Let's see what really happened, to try to figure out the truth to this, the stumbling blocks. I mean, some of these, like Vandenberg, some of the statements he made, and Gordon Cooper, the astronaut, and all that, you see that a lot of people believed back then, and there was something to it. But something caused them to shut up. Once we get past that point, when the government does acknowledge it, the door will open. Believe me, the door will open once the government says we have craft flying around. This is Jose Ley and Xavier Passot from Chile and France. This is what they wanted by coming here. They wanted the United States to open up, and just state what is going on. They do. Jose just dies laughing, basically, because 99% of the people in Chile accept the phenomenon. They know it's real. They're told it's real. The police answer calls like it's real. They turn it over to the Air Force, who believes it's real. And it's not a question to them in Chile. We have craft flying in the air. We don't know where they're coming from. And France, created a law where if you hoax a UFO sighting and call it a fake sighting, it's a felony. They take it seriously. And the United States just won't let its pilots talk.
No.
Everything is shut up. Keep the news teams down,
Well, it's not only that, it's that you drive researchers to suicide. I mean, you discredit people. I mean, it has been decade after decade of belittling the subject of, to me, it's there's so much that goes into what happened with all of this in the United States government, and they really dropped the ball. And whether whether they did that because they didn't know what to do, I don't know. I think that you look at the Chilean government, you look at France and some of these other countries, and you see that they're much more progressive, and they have not done what the United States government has done with regard to this subject.
I think the United States made the mistake years ago in the 40s and 50s based on World War II and the fear of the Cold War, looking at it as whatever these are, looking at the military aspect. How can we use this, and what do they know? Let's keep this all secret. And it shot itself in the foot. I mean, to tell you the truth, it didn't solve the problem. It just created a bigger one.
It did. And I've got to ask you a really quick question because somebody in chat wants to ask this. So, with regard to the satellite, and I'm just going back here to look at this, the Russian satellite. So, who told you it was a Russian satellite? It was on all the news, national news, the very next morning. I didn't go look it up or anything. Well, back then computers weren't that great. I mean, it was a new and upcoming thing, but it made all the national news. It was on the radio, and I'm like, that's what I saw. But, I watched this thing, basically a whole 180 degree go from one end of the sky to the other. And when it got to the point where, like in front of me, you could see the pieces falling off and as it was burning up. But to be fooled, I've gone through so many things where people can actually see something and believe, it's a UFO. And there's really an explanation for a lot of this. I just happen to be on the other end where I've actually seen these craft that just stop you. It changes your life. It really does. It will change your life in a heartbeat once you see it. I've heard from so many skeptics that's seen a craft sighting, and they're not a skeptic anymore. And that it's just the belief that, man, I'm not being told something. We were being lied to. And this technology, they don't teach us in school. They teach us everything opposite. Right.
And
absolutely, we've got a minute to show close, but I wanted to say that I've got to have you back, and you need to share more of your experiences, and I know you have, but I mean, you rock. Thank you. Thank you for actually having a conference with credible people, and thank you for doing what everybody else in the United States should have done. I mean, God bless you.
Well, thank you very much. It's a start, but I'm going to fight this like my cancer. I'm going to fight it all the way to the end. One thing that I did see was George Fawcett pass away and not have any satisfaction knowing what he saw in the MIBs and the whole thing. And I hope before it's my time to go that we come to some better conclusions than what we've come to so far. But
you know what?
Start.
I will tell you what, though. I mean, we're finding each other, and I swear we're all going to do this together because you and I have the same type of attitude, and we want the best. So thank you so much for being here. And
thank you, Erica, for having me on.
Yes, and I want to thank all of you for being here. I will catch you next week. Please be safe and stick around for a great night on KCOR.
Listen very carefully.
This is Houston. Say again, please. Houston, we've had a problem.
This is UFO Classified, live every Friday night, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. The truth is out there, just waiting to be discovered.
And now, if you will, accompany me on a journey to the future.
For more information on the host of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes, upcoming guests, as well as links to the past shows,
visit her website at ufoclassified.com.
UFO Classified.
UFO Classified.
This is KCOR Las Vegas, home of the Digital Radio Network.